This meeting is being recorded.
All right, good evening.
Good evening, Chris.
My name is Chris Eberly. I'm president of Anne Arundel Bird Club, and I want to welcome all the Anne Arundel and Patuxent Bird Club members and any guests from other MOS chapters or anywhere else. I think we have what'll be a really nice, interesting, fun talk this evening. Just to do some club business at the start, let's get an update on field trips. Alan, Sue, if you want to update us on all that.
Now we had some problems with the weather this since our last meeting. On the 6th of February, nine folks came over and met together to go at Kinder Farm Park. We had a very nice morning, a little chilly. The one highlight was that there was an introduction to the season. A woodcock was penting a little bit. Now, Sue and I have not been over to find them in the early evening because it's been a lot of cold and wind, but it's on our hope list to get out in the next, as soon as it clears up and the wind slows down a little bit, to get out and see if they're there. It's not the safe date, but it's still about the time we got them every year now for a long time. So we're hoping that that the woodcocks will come back this year. Our Swan Harbor Farm trip with Matt Addix, really good birder, nice young man. And he's taken us on these trips before. It's a good place if you haven't ever been there. It was postponed because of the snow, and we rescheduled it 2 weeks later. So we're going to have that on February 27th. We're going to make up that trip so we can try to do that again. Jim Colotz is going to take folks around on the 20th in Quiet Waters, and looking forward to that trip. Thank you, Jim. And then on the 26th, Greenberry Point, and Linda Bichok is going to walk us around there. So that's what we have for the rest of this month.
All right, great, thanks. And yeah, the newsletter ought to be been communicating with Deb Wade, and we're getting there, and it should be out with by the end of the month. So that should have all the March trip updates in it then as well. All right, great. Any other interesting sightings of note? We were talking about a few of the gulls in and around the area.
Well, after 7.5 years from Buffalo, I finally saw a tree sparrow in this area while looking for, but not finding, the yellow-headed blackbird. But I was just thrilled that after 7.5 years, I finally saw another tree sparrow. They were backyard birds for me back in Buffalo, not here.
Okay, Ken, we got them too. This is a really great place. If you've never been here, it's in Harford County called Mariner Point.
Yeah, that's where
it's in the
I
Joppa
got
Town. And we got the yellow-headed too, but you had to stay.
Super.
You had to stay till like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He's a late riser, and we met people that told us you can't go home yet. And they said he's going to be with cowbirds, and sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So you got to go back.
Okay,
And,
I'll have to get back and try another shot for it.
Yeah, do it
Thanks.
because it's really worth a look. He comes right down. People walk around that park. It's a circle, but there's like a boardwalk, and they leave bird seed all along. Fred, you were there too. Fred, you got it.
Oh yeah.
And they feed the squirrels, and they have enormous squirrels that come right up to you because they want you to feed them. Some of the squirrels are black squirrels. They're evidently gray squirrels that just are black. But it's they have bathrooms at the park. It's a really nice place to navigate, easy walking. handicap accessible. And yes, you got to go back, but the yellow-headed blackbird does not get up until 1. They said 1 at the earliest, and once he comes out, he stays out for 2 or 3 hours.
And the cowbirds come in, scout it out. They sit around where he eats, and he finds a nice hole where they put the seed on it. It's like going to a zoo in some ways, because when you're walking along, all the birds are standing on these 2 sides of these fences that they feed. And you're like 2, 3, 4 feet from them, and they're not the least bit shy.
We had a pileated woodpecker about like 3 feet from us, making a hole. We could have touched them, but they're so used to people feeding them. And one woman was there, a chickadee was eating out of her hand. There was a woman sitting on the ground with squirrels crawling on her. She's giving them nuts. It's kind of a great experience. I highly recommend it. Real easy to get to. It's just off of Pulaski Highway. It only takes about a half hour for us to get there. So if you haven't ever checked it out, put it on your list. It's really worth it. Okay.
Any other sightings of note? Okay, our March program next month. Let's see, Gene, you're April, I believe. I gotta get this straight. in my
Correct,
mind.
April.
Great. Okay, thanks. So yeah, next month. And I'm still working to connect with our speaker to get all the details, but he has confirmed that he will be doing the Zoom meeting. Jacob Marlin, who is executive director of the Belize Foundation for Research and Environmental Education, also known as BFRE. I have visited that site a couple of times, and they do a lot of really cool work, not just on birds, but on Hicatee, which is their native turtle that they're working to help restore. And Harpy Eagle has recently started nesting once again after many, many years in that part of Belize, which is sort of central to southern part, large forested area. So we'll hopefully get the information into the newsletter in time for that. And then April, we have Jean, who's gonna give us the primer on shorebirds. So we're gonna get the gulls tonight, do a little international travel next month, and shorebirds in April, and we'll be set. So tonight, I'm real happy that we got Fred to speak with us. A lot of you know Fred Shaffer. Fred has worked with the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for more than 30 years and became interested in gulls by observing the large flocks that gathered each day at Schoolhouse Pond just outside his office. He enjoys observing gulls in all their diversity and plumages and has documented his gull observations from Schoolhouse Pond in Maryland BirdLife. He has studied the gulls in their natural habitat across North America and photographed the many plumages of each species, and has a book, if you don't know about, I will let him tell you all about this book, and when he starts, that will now not be available apparently until next month. And I think some of you have pre-orders already in. Fred, with that,
Hey,
I know, yeah.
Oh, yeah, thank you for the introduction. So I just called up my presentation. Is it coming up for?
All right, I forgot, I need to, whoop, let's see. Co-host, okay, there you go.
Okay, can everybody see it? Gulls of North
Not-
America?
Not yet, I just made you the co-host, so you're gonna have to unshare and then go back and share it again. And remember, if you're doing sound, remember to click that share computer audio box.
Oh, so I should hit share screen and then go to
Yeah.
the power.
Yeah, share screen, then go to the PowerPoint.
All right. Anything?
Not yet. So share screen.
Oh,
select the-
okay, I see. Okay, sorry. And
That's
we
all
even
right.
ran, Chris was nice enough to go through this with me too. How's that?
There we go. We got it.
All right.
Perfect. All right. Fred, take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much. For those who don't know me, I'm Fred Shaffer. I'm a longtime Maryland birder. And a lot of my early birding was at Schoolhouse Pond. I worked across the street from it for 30 plus years. And that was part of the reason I ended up getting into Gulls. Schoolhouse Pond strategically located between the Brown Station Road landfill and Jug Bay. So you can get a lot of gulls stopping in there. And it was really a unique opportunity where I could just see large number of gulls every day, get more familiar with their diversity and plumages and how they vary with age. And then it really led into a larger interest in gulls. And I've been fortunate to be able to travel different parts of North America to see gulls and see many of the rare species. And so basically what I'm going to be going over tonight, it's partly going to be talking about the gulls of Schoolhouse Pond, which was how I got started with my local gulls. And I kind of hope that the discussion on Schoolhouse Pond will encourage other folks to find a spot near them where gulls congregate and just observe them, get to know them a little bit better and their diversity. And chances are, if you look at it long enough, you'll turn up some rarities around the way. I'm also going to give a little bit of information, big picture type information on gull identification, have some kind of travelogue discussion about seeing gulls across North America. I'm going to have a few stories about that, and some of the names have been changed to protect those who are implicated in some of the stories. And then I'm also talk a little bit about my dream for doing a gull book, and then the ultimate development of that. This isn't going to be a presentation where I just pitch my book, but it's going to be more of a talk about gulls locally across North America, and then how that led to the development of the book. Now, basically my passion for gulls started with Schoolhouse Pond, a trip to Bombay Hook to see a black-headed gull, and an article by Rick Blum. Like others, initially I avoided gulls because I thought they were too variable and too tough to ID. And actually, for the first 10 years I was across the street from Schoolhouse Pond, I kind of put blinders on regarding the gulls, and I just looked at the other stuff that I could readily identify. But kind of over time, I came to appreciate how approachable they were, the diversity, the changes in plumage over the season and over the course of the year, their propensity to wander, which ends up sometimes you can see something really rare. And then with my observations at Schoolhouse Pond, I ended up turning a lot of rare gulls in the course of my observations, white-winged gulls, black-headed gulls, things like that. Now, some days the pond was literally covered with gulls. And as I was telling my wife, I kind of saw getting interested in gulls was kind of a crime of opportunity. They were just there every day, flying over the pond, gathered on the ice. And it just was a real good learning opportunity. And Schoolhouse Pond isn't unique. You probably have hot spots like this near where you live as well. I remember this particular day in the photo, there were 960 gulls there, and they were all ring-billed gulls. But some days there were other birds in the mix, which kept it interesting. And some of my favorite days were when white-winged gulls showed up. I've got a glaucous gull and a Iceland gull, both first winter birds. And I remember my first few years searching for gulls at Schoolhouse Pond. I really wanted to see a glaucous gull, and I just never did. And then eventually I finally saw one on a cold winter day. The pond was frozen over, and there was this huge, pure white, or almost pure white gull. And I looked at it, And initially what I was thinking, it was a domestic duck. It was that big and bulky, but it was a first winter glaucous gull. Glaucous gulls are my favorite birds, by the way. I wanted it to be something that I would see in Maryland from time to time. I thought about Ross's gull and Ivory Gall, but glaucous gull fits the bill. I like Arctic birds. I like rarities. And I just thought with their all white plumage and then the white wingtips when they're adults, they're just really striking birds. Now, I gradually began documenting what I saw at Schoolhouse Pond. And the numbers were pretty amazing at times. And perhaps the most remarkable month I had at Schoolhouse Pond was December 2004. And for whatever reason, I think it was really cold that month. The pond was frozen over, and there were just a lot of gulls that turned up. And this slide shows the table that was originally published in Maryland BirdLife on the observations that month. And you can see a lot of them were the common gulls, ring-billed, laughing herring, but there were a lot of rarities. And it was really incredible. For like 2 weeks, it was like every day there was another rarity on the pond. And it started with a immature Iceland gull that I had found. That, and then people were looking for that bird. And then 2 days later, Hans Holbrook found a black-headed gull. And so that was really a remarkable sighting. And a lot of people got to see that bird. And then when people were looking for that, a glaucous gull was found. Another Iceland gull was seen. The black-headed gull was seen another time or two. But the most remarkable bird was probably seen Christmas Eve. And it was found by Sherman Suter. And he had found a mew gull at the pond. And I believe it was the first Prince George's County record. I have it listed here as the West Coast variety, now known as a short-billed gull. But I spoke to Phil Davis about this a few days ago. And I believe the records committee was the subspecies or now species wasn't definitively identified. So it's probably best termed a short-bill / common gull. But that was truly a remarkable bird. And 2 days later, a bunch of us were out there looking for the mew gull. We didn't see it, but there were 4 lesser blackback gulls and then an adult glaucous gull, which is pretty, immatures occur from time to time in Maryland, but adult plumage birds are much harder to come by. And we were looking at that bird, and then after several hours looking at the gulls, as a lot of us were packing up to leave, another white-winged gull flew up, and it was an adult Iceland gull or an adult Cumlin's gull. And that was really a remarkable day. And I believe there was also a potential lesser blackback herring gull hybrid present. And then a few days later, there was a gull that showed up that was a first-year Thayer's gull, or now subspecies Thayeri of the Iceland gull complex. So that was really a remarkable month, and I still remember it fondly. A lot of great birds, a lot of rarities, and I kind of think it just shows the benefit of finding a spot, birding it regularly, and you never know what might turn up. And that's the great thing about gulls. They show up in big numbers. They tend to be where people are. They're approachable. And when you get big numbers of them, like you do frequently at Schoolhouse Pond, there can be something rare mixed in there. Now, and one of the great things about Schoolhouse Pond is you do get close to the birds. You can see I've got photos of adult herring gull, lesser blackback, and ring-billed gull here. So it was just a really good opportunity for me to learn the gulls, to see them up close, to see how they change over time, and to occasionally turn up a rarity. Now, this kind of table, so I kept my gull counts for close to 20 years at Schoolhouse Pond, and this is kind of a 10-year snapshot. And not to get into the minutia, but there were a lot of gulls seen over a lot of years. Most of them were the ones you'd expect to see, but there was a pattern of occurrence for Iceland gulls, glaucous gulls in smaller numbers, I think 4 black-headed gulls showed up at the pond during that time. A handful of Franklin's gulls, the Mew gull, 1 little gull, and then there were a variety of potential hybrids, the herring glaucus gull hybrid, and then slightly more regularly, the lesser blackback herring gull hybrid. So a lot of exciting stuff, and it's one of the reasons Schoolhouse Pond's one of my favorite local spots, and a lot of neat stuff turns up there. This photo, of course, just shows ring-billed gulls, but as most of you probably already know, you can be looking at a flock of gulls. They can all look identifiably different, and they can all be ring-billed gulls or herring gulls. They just change in appearance based on the age, based on molt, based on individual variability. And that's one of the things that makes gulls interesting, makes them a challenge, but at the same time also scares people off. And one thing I'll note, and I mentioned this to Alan and Sue when we were looking at gulls the other day, it just seems to me, just based on my limited experience, that the worse the weather gets, the windier, the snowier, the icier, the more wintry it gets, the better the gulls seem to be. And that's when I seem to see the biggest number at Schoolhouse Pond. And it is just kind of an added element that makes it challenging and fun. And this picture in particular was an ice storm, and it was very nasty out. The pond was frozen over. And actually my favorite black-headed gull sighting at Schoolhouse Pond was during Snowmageddon in 2010. We got let go of work early that day, and there were a lot of gulls in the pond. So instead of going home, I went out to the pond and I was looking at these gulls, and I came across this one. Initially, I thought it was a black-headed gull, a Bonaparte's gull, because the bill looked dark and the leg looks dark because the light, it was so bad because it was snowing so hard. I mean, it was practically whiteout conditions. Eventually, we figured out it was a black-headed gull. And when my scope ended up having an accumulation of ice on it, I ended up calling it quits. But that was a real exciting sighting at Schoolhouse Pond. And, one of the neat things, whether you're at Sandy Point, whether you're at Schoolhouse Pond, or wherever you see a lot of gulls, I think one of the joys of studying them is you get to see how they vary with age. And what I've got here is the first winter great black in upper left, second winter in upper, third winter in below left, and then the full adult in the bottom right. And gulls are variable. The big ones take 4 years to achieve their adult plumage. And I'm going to mention it more briefly, but I really liked, there was an article, and actually I'll hold on to that for a second. So you can also see how gulls change due to molt. And this bird here in this slide is the famous long-staying black-headed gull up at Hunt Valley Mall. I believe this bird showed up at the parking lot for 4 or 5 winters total. And I went up there, I was still working at the time, but I went up there as often as I could. You could see how the bird changed over the course of a winter. The top left picture is, of course, full winter. I believe that picture was taken in December. But the interesting thing is the bottom center picture was taken March 16th. That shows the gull in kind of transitional plumage as it's molting into breeding plumage. And then the upper right picture was taken just 5 days later. So you can see how fast this change in appearance takes place. Basically on March 16th, the bird had a partial hood with a lot of white in it. And by March 21st, it basically had a full hood. So I think that those kind of things are very interesting as well. Now, I mentioned also, in addition to Schoolhouse Pond, there was a trip to Bombay Hook that I took in, actually 2 trips, in August 2002. And there was a black-headed gull at Bombay Hook. And the word that I got was that it was nailed to the mud flats. So on August 8th, I went out there, and of course I didn't see it. I was looking for it, didn't see it, but subsequently, the bird showed back up again. So 2 weeks later, I went back out and I ended up seeing the black-headed gull. And it was my life black-headed gull at the time. And incidentally, the picture in the gull in this picture, that is the black-headed gull from Ocean City Inlet. So different black-headed gull. But regarding the Bombay hookbird, I was looking at the bird and I was kind of sitting on the edge of the roadway that goes around the impoundments. And I was looking at the black-headed gull and I was flipping through my Sibley guide. And of course, he's got the plates where you can see all of the birds of the family or a particular bird group. And I was looking at the black-headed gull, I was looking at his illustrations, and then I was looking at all the gull species that are in North America. And I was like, wow, it'd be really neat to eventually someday to see all of those species in as many plumages and as many different seasons, different weathers, different ages. I just wanted to see them all kind of the way Sibley had them. And that kind of started a goal of mine or a dream of mine to see all these birds. It ended up taking me 16 years, but eventually I did see all of them. A lot of them close to home and some of them on the West Coast or up in Alaska. So it's been a real fun process, an enjoyable process. Now, this is the article I was telling you about, kind of in conjunction with my looking at the gulls at Schoolhouse Pond and then seeing the black-headed Bombay hook. Rick Blum had done an article in Birdwatchers Digest, and it really caught my attention. It was identifying gulls, don't panic. And basically what he presented here was a simplified process for aging the gulls that you see and then putting an ID on them. And kind of the approach he took was that the majority of people get scared off of gulls, like I was for a lot of years, because they're horrified at the extremes in identification. They're horrified by all the different plumages. They're kind of put off by how difficult it is. They think they can never learn it. And Rick Blum in this article really laid out a simplified framework for it won't necessarily get you to identify every bird that you see, but it'll help you on 99% of them. And I thought that was really a good approach. And I really kind of embraced it and started looking at the gulls I saw, aging them, and then using that as a step for getting to the proper identification. And it was a fun article too, as Rick Blum, for those who are familiar with his writing, he had a really good way of putting things, or kind of a whimsical way that made it fun. And so basically he divided the gulls into small, the 2-year gulls, the medium-sized gulls like ring-billed and short-billed gull, and then the large gulls. And most of the article actually focused on the 4-year gulls or the large gulls, mainly because those are the ones that have people pulling their hair out. Those are the ones that people have trouble identifying and are intimidated by. And I'm not going to do what he said in his article justice here, but I will say that basically the process he had was the first-year gull or the immature gull, the first-year gull and the adult gull are the beginning and end of the process for how they change in appearance. And then the second and third year are intermediate between those. And oversimplifying, but the first year are brown or mostly brown. Second year is mostly brown, but they may have some gray coming in on the mantle, maybe a little bit lighter underneath, a white rump. Third year is mostly like an adult with the gray or the black upper parts, but they may retain more black on the bill and have a trace of a tail band and maybe some immature feathers on the wings. And then the fourth year is the adult. And just looking at this process, and then he fleshes it out a little bit more in the article, but you really get to a point where, yeah, you can age the birds that you see, and that's the first step in identifying them correctly. And that was actually the approach that I tried to take with the book that I ended up developing. Was I wanted to more to the big picture of what people see in the field, as opposed to the feather by feather minutia. because I think one of the things that Roger Tory Peterson was a genius at was simplifying things so that people could readily identify the birds they were looking at using their binoculars or a spotting scope. And I think a lot of gull identification has kind of gone in the opposite direction, where they get to the feather by feather minutia. And you can read through that, and there's a lot of great information in there. And sometimes you need it for a difficult identification. But a lot of times the things that you need to be looking for in the field for most birders gets kind of lost in the minutia. And I kind of wanted to just simplify things and make it so that people could identify gulls with the looks they're getting with the binoculars. And I think it's nothing, it's not rocket science. Other authors have done that. Rick Bloom certainly did that. And I think synopsises of this approach are also included in the Stokes North American Guide. And I think the National Geographic Complete Birds of North America also has a sidebar on it. So once I started looking at the gulls of Schoolhouse Pond, I began looking elsewhere for gulls, initially close to home, then a little bit further. Now, we were discussing before the meeting started the kelp gull, known as shrimpy, down in St. Mary's County. I believe this bird was present from 98 or 99 up until early 2005. And a remarkable bird. It was, of course, a South American gull. It took up residence here in Maryland in the colder months for a number of years. And I believe ABA said that it was the possibly the most viewed bird in American Birding Association history, because everybody who wanted to see a kelp gull went down to Sandgates, St. Mary's County to see it. And people who were doing big years or whatever went to Sandgates to see it. And I was fortunate I went down there, and I guess I saw it on 3 separate occasions. And one of the things I really liked when I went through the process of putting my book together was I looked at a lot of articles, and actually the bibliography in my book, I believe, is 10 pages long. So I looked at a lot of identification articles, more technical stuff, things on behavior. But some of my favorite quotes were from either newspapers or from the early naturalists or explorers. And a lot of what we first learned about a lot of the gulls were from naturalists, and in the case of the Arctic gulls, from the people who were exploring the Arctic. And so I included a lot of quotes from them, and if you'll indulge me, I'll read a few of them. Now, regarding St. Mary's kelp gull, it was mentioned in the Baltimore Sun, and the article said, with its snow white head and breast, black wings and white spots like pearl studs, the bird looks quite elegant on the utility pole, an old school gentleman in a dress suit. Its bill, a yellow snozola worthy of W.C. Fields, undercuts the elegance a bit. So obviously that's not scientific or anything, but I thought it was a pretty memorable quote. Now, this was another really great bird, the gray-hooded gull from Coney Island. So this bird showed up, and I believe it was actually first correctly identified by eBird reviewers. And it combined a super rare gull with kind of a memorable location, being Coney Island Amusement Park. But so when I was working for Park and Planning, I did a walk before work, and then I walked around the pond at lunchtime. And I just finished my morning walk, and I was entering my stuff into eBird. And the eBird news for that day was the gray-hooded gull at Coney Island, the avian sensation of the summer. And so immediately I packed up my stuff and put my coat on, and I was heading for the exit. And I bumped into somebody who said, "Well, you are coming to the meeting this afternoon, aren't you?" And I was like, "Well, sure, why do you ask?" And I went back to my desk, and I wasn't happy about it, but I got through the workday, and I touched base with Jeff Cheneau, and we ended up leaving Crofton the following morning at 1 a.m., got to Coney Island at 5:30, and then the bird showed up at 7:30. And it was right in the amusement park. There were people all over the boardwalk. It was under the Wonder Wheel ride. It was perched on the volleyball nets. and there were people doing exercises, swimming, calisthenics, and all that. And this rare, ultra rare South American gull was there. And that was a very memorable sighting for me. And like I said, eBird said it was the avian sensation of the summer. And it was even featured in an article in the New York Times, which stated that the hordes of birders from across the country that descended upon the beach, lugging cameras, telephoto lenses, tripods, and binoculars, made for an unusual scene, even for Coney Island. So I think they're used to some unusual stuff going on up there, but the gray-hooded gull was definitely a new one, and it was really a memorable day. Now, another bird that Jeff Janot and I chased after was the black-tailed gull. Now, this photo here is actually from Vireo. I wasn't able to get a picture of this bird because of the distance, but for those who went to the Maryland, the MOS conference in 2002, David Sibley spoke, and one of the things that stuck or has stayed with me from his talk was he said it's a fine line between bird watching and standing around like an idiot. And so we stood around waiting for this bird outside the wastewater treatment plant for at least 8 hours. And it was supposedly in this group of like 2,000 gulls about a half mile away, and we're all standing around. And there was one guy that was in particular that was talking nonstop the whole time, odds and ends about the bird, about birding in general, blah, blah, blah. And at one point he said, the bird in question is in front of the yellow tank. And then he said, well, I wonder what's in that tank. And then the guy next to him goes, well, it's a wastewater treatment plant. It can only be one of two things. But that only slowed down the verbal barrage momentarily. And eventually Jeff and I went elsewhere to see what we could find. But that guy called us back and said, look, the bird's in view now from a different vantage point. So he quickly went from being a minor annoyance to a trusted ally and getting us on this bird. And so that was exciting, and it was a long, long wait. But eventually the bird lifted up, banked in front of the various tanks and retaining ponds, and we saw it in all its glory with the white rump and the black tail. And a funny aside from that story was, as soon as the bird was out of view again, a bunch of people got back in their cars and immediately drove off. And a bunch of the Ohio people said, that's those Michigan birders for you. So apparently they had their reputation of ticking and running. Now, another bird that I was fortunate to see was the Ivory Gall up in Massachusetts in 2009. This was, of course, all of you familiar with the various listservs and rare bird alerts in Maryland. And it's a kind of a rule that you just post about Maryland. You don't post about extraliminal stuff. But in this particular case, I remember somebody said, oh, by the way, there's an Ivory Gall up in Massachusetts. And so I immediately sent an email out to Frank Marenghi and to Bill Hubick. And I was like, look, I know it's a long way, but you want to go up there? And I never heard back from them. And it's because they had left midnight the night before. So I was kind of fishing around for people to go up there. And I called some other people and they were like, no, it's a long way. We probably won't see it. And so I was bent out of shape about that, particularly when I'd be looking on my computer and people would be talking about these point blank views and everything that they were getting. But eventually, my brother and I went up there the following weekend, and we saw the Ivory Gall in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is pictured here. And you didn't have to find the bird, you just had to find the parking lot that was ringed by cars, tripods, telescopes, cameras, and the bird was dead center in the middle. And it really is true. I'd seen some authors say this, but the Ivory Gulls are purer white than the snow that they stand on. It really was the case. And there were a lot of birders there, probably 100 people. And some of them had been birding for 40, 50 plus years. And it was the first sighting of the species for them. So as it was for me. So it was really a remarkable day, memorable sighting of a very incredibly rare Arctic bird. Now, I guess at the end of 2009, an Ivory Gall showed up in Cape May, and I went out to see that bird as well. It was an immature bird, so I got to see both the adult plumage in Massachusetts and then the immature plumage in Cape May. But this was remarkable. This photo here, we were on a small observation platform, and the bird was literally right beneath us on the mud flats and on various low snags in the water. Truly a remarkable, memorable sighting. Now, another bird a lot of people want to see, and it usually requires a trip up to Alaska, is the red-legged kittiwake. And I was fortunate enough to get up there, I guess it was 2017. And I know Phil's probably seen lots of these birds, but this was the first time for me. And we got great views of them on the mud flats, very close. We saw them in comparison with the black-legged kittiwakes. And the thing that was interesting about them, because a lot of times you focus on the legs, it's red-legged versus black-legged, but there are a lot of other differences between the two species, and you can sort of see it in this photo here. The four birds on the left are all black-legged kittiwakes, and the red-legged kittiwakes is behind top right. And you can see how it's got a shorter bill, it's got more of a sloping forehead. The wings are darker both above and below. So in addition to the different leg color, they're also very recognizably different from black-legged kittiwakes in flight, or even from a distance when perched, even if you can't see the leg color. One of my favorite things is seeing look-alike or similar species side by side. And this picture shows an adult or near adult great blackback gull with an adult lesser blackback gull. And I've seen a lot of birders looking through groups of great blackback gulls, looking at the leg color, but really there's so much more that differentiates the two species. The mustard yellow legs is just one of them. And you can see from this picture here, obviously lesser blackbacks are much smaller. The bill is smaller and more parallel edged, and it lacks that bulbous tip that the great blackback gull has. Lesser blackbacks also have the pale eye and heavily streaked head, whereas adult great blackback gulls in winter are white-headed. So you can see that there's a lot of differences there besides just the leg color. Now, the Ross's gulls up at Point Barrow, this is really in my, I guess my years or decades of birding, this was one of my most memorable trips, was going up to Point Barrow to see the Ross's gull migration over the Arctic Ocean. And I think ornithologists have known about this migration since at least the 1880s, if not before then. And it's every late September and then through October, Ross's gulls migrate past the point in small to medium-sized groups, and sometimes in really, really large numbers. And I believe it's the High Arctic Gull Research Group. I might be getting the name wrong, but they've done a lot of research on the Ross's gull migration, and they've really documented what big numbers these birds move past that point every fall. I think they had like 27,000 one October, including some hours at the peak of migration where they had several thousand going by an hour, which is pretty remarkable. We didn't see those kind of numbers, but we did see good numbers of them. Truly a remarkable bird. And of course, the locals call them the pink seagull. Now, this isn't one of my photos. This is one from Vireo. And it just shows that spectacular breeding plumage with the black chin strap or collar. And I mentioned earlier about how I like the quotes of the early naturalists and the Arctic explorers, kind of because they embodied the spirit of discovery. They loved the subject matter and they were very enthusiastic about it. Well, polar explorer Nansen, in 1894, he was in the Arctic, and he had this quote, which I just love, when he first saw his Ross's gull. A remarkable occurrence, let's see. A remarkable occurrence took place. We were visited by the Arctic Ross gull. Today my longing has been satisfied. This rare, mysterious inhabitant of the unknown north, which is only occasionally seen, and of which no one knows whence it cometh and whereth it goeth, which belongs exclusively to the world to which the imagination aspires, is what from the first moment I saw these tracks, I had always hoped to discover as my eyes roamed over these lonely plains of ice. And that quote there just kind of summarizes in my mind the joy of seeing one of these birds. And like I said, a lot of what we learned about many of the Arctic gulls, Ross's gulls, Ivory Galls, Sabin's gulls, was discovered by early Arctic explorers. And in fact, I believe it was a group of Arctic explorers. They were stuck in the pack ice up north of Siberia, and they saw a lot of Ross's gulls flying back and forth. And that was really the first evidence of indication that they nested in Siberia, or that part of Russia. So no discussion of gulls is complete without mention of the great white gull or glaucous gull. Like I said, this is my favorite bird. They were the picture of the adults here on the left-hand side was taken from Barrow, Alaska, and the lower right picture of the first winter bird was also Barrow, Alaska. And then the picture of the upper right is of a bird from the Salisbury landfill back when you could get in there. And that was actually a second winter bird. But I really like these birds. They're bold, they're imposing. They've got those white wingtips. They're an Arctic species, yet they still occasionally grace Maryland. So we're fortunate enough to see them down here from time to time. Now, the California gull is the state bird of Utah. And the way they got to be the state bird of Utah was the miracle of the Gulls, as they were seen as the saviors of the Mormon colonists of the 1800s. And there were a couple of really neat quotes here that kind of outline that event. And first, let me preface it by saying, I think ornithologists know now that there was a lot more that went into the demise of the Mormon crickets than just the gulls, but the gulls were a part of it. And so basically what happened, the Mormons were trying to get settled in the Great Salt Lake Basin, and they were building their homes and sowing their crops and just building a life out there. And they were growing things so that they could eat. And then what they called the Mormon crickets descended, and they were eating just about everything that was green. And the settlers were beside themselves, and they were doing everything possible to get rid of the crickets, including using water, flooding areas, using fire, bludgeoning them with broom handles, on and on. And then nothing seemed to be working. And then, as they said here, and this was John Smith reported it, this is in the History of the Mormon Church. When all seemed lost and the saints were giving up in despair, out of the heavens the heavens became clouded with gulls, which hovered over the fields, uttering their plaintive scream. Was this a new evil come upon them? Such were the thought of some who expected what the crickets left the gulls would destroy. But not so. The gulls in countless battalions descended and began to devour the crickets, waging a battle for the preservation of the crops. The people gave thanks, for this was to them a miracle. Surely the Lord was merciful and had sent the gulls as angels of mercy for their salvation. And so that was one of the stories regarding the California gulls that I found really enticing. And then it was reported in the St. Louis Republican, a newspaper in 1849, that hundreds and thousands of gulls made their appearance early in the spring. And as soon as the crickets appeared, the gulls made war on them. And they have swept them clean so that there's scarce a cricket to be found in the valley. In recognition of this event, there's a Salt Lake City commemorates the miracle of the Gulls with a big, I guess it's a statue of a seagull, or the California gull. And the California gull is the state bird of Utah. And like I said, there were likely other things that played into the cricket's demise, but the California gull's place in Utah lore was ensured, and now it's the state bird. And incidentally, regarding California gulls, they, unlike most gulls, which people expect to see out at the seashore or the bay, they like the saline lakes out west and interior lakes in the Mountain West. So they have a habitat preference that's much different than a lot of our gulls, at least in breeding season. Now, I just threw this picture in there. Breeding plumage Heermann's gull is perhaps North America's most stunning gull. And I've seen these gulls, of course, a number of times whenever I go to Southern California, and usually they're in non-breeding plumage. But the breeding plumage gull with that bright white head contrasting with the dark gray body and wings is really a striking, stunning bird. And I guess the lipstick red bill only adds to the allure. Now, Western gull, of course, they're iconic sentinels of our beautiful West Coast beaches, and they seem particularly tied to the Pacific shoreline, the beaches, the sea stacks, the offshore islands. And what I have pictured here is first year Western gull, actually mostly juvenile plumage on upper left, then a second year Western gull to the right, third year Western gull on the upper right-hand side, and then an adult on the lower right. And some of my favorite quotes were from biologist William Finley. So at the turn of the 1900s, I believe it was 1905 or slightly before then, he spent a lot of time on the offshore islands of Oregon and on the sea stacks. And he was specifically documenting the bird life there, the species there, what they were doing, who was nesting, and all that. And he ended up publishing it in 2 articles in the Condor. And it really provides a fascinating glimpse into the lives of the birds that colonize these rocky islands and sea stacks. And he had some really, really memorable quotes that caught my attention. And he has one in particular on the parental attentiveness of Western gulls with their young. And this one, he says, they teach your young to keep hidden and to lie close. I've seen more than one gull impress this upon her children. One day I was walking along a ledge and came abruptly to a place where I could look down the top slope. Below me a few yards, I saw 2 half-grown gulls. One crouches beside a rock, but the other started to run down the ridge. He hadn't gone 2 yards before the mother dove at him with a blow that knocked him rolling. He got up dazed and struck off in a new direction, but she swooped again and rapped him on the head till he seemed glad enough to crawl in under the nearest weed. So there you have it, the parental attentiveness of the Western gulls, teaching their young. Now, Finley had a lot of quotes like that, and he praised them as masters of the air. He had a really neat kind of photo collage of Western gulls in flights, which even though they're kind of grainy and black and white, it's really a beautiful collection of photos. And he said they filled the air like so many feathered snowflakes, but he was less complimentary about some of their other behavior. Let's see. So, but what he goes on to say, but what is beauty if only skin deep? A gull is not the white-winged angel that the poet sees. A gull in its own country will steal like a politician and murder like a pirate. They swarmed about us like vultures after a battle. The moment our approach drove a mirror cormorant from its nest, the saintly-looking scallywag swooped down to eat the eggs and the young. The gulls are freebooters and robbers on the island, but it is only when the other birds are frightened from their nests that they have a chance to carry out their nefarious trade. And of course, now it's no surprise to anyone here that gulls are predatory birds, they're opportunistic foragers, and they can levy a toll on the other birds that nest in their vicinity. But the way Finley captured it here was just memorable quotes that I really enjoyed reading and then incorporated stuff like this into my book. Now, this bird here is the yellow-footed gull. And this is actually one of my favorite gull pictures. It's on the shores of the Salton Sea. You can see the yellow legs on the bird, the gull in the back, and then a black-necked stilt foraging in the foregrounds. And a lot of gulls, it seems like you have to be out in the cold, in the snow, in the wind, at a beach or along a bay or a frozen lake or something to see them. But yellow-footed gulls require trip to the hot and steamy Salton Sea. The first time I saw him, I believe it was 119. The day this picture was taken, it was a very manageable 98, and there was a nice breeze. But this again is another remarkable gull that takes a trip out to Southern California to see, but a truly imposing gull and really a spectacular natural setting. A lot of other birds present as well. Now, when I was talking to Chris about the presentation, he was hoping to see a picture of Maryland's slaty-back gull, and my pictures aren't very good, but I've included one here where I have the slaty-back circled and then a kind of a blow up on the upper left. Now, Tim Carney found this bird at Swan Creek, and it was relocated several days later by Tom Field near the Pennington Avenue Bridge, the drawbridge over Curtis Creek. And Dan Haas and I had been out looking for the bird. I didn't see it. And then I had some family commitments and I left. And then we had just gotten a table at the All-American Steakhouse in Odenton when I got the message that the bird had been relocated and it's on the roof by the Pennington Avenue drawbridge. So my sons were telling me I was pounding the table harder than the Eagle fans who were watching their team get torched in the playoffs. I ate a hasty meal, left the check to my wife, and then bolted back up towards the Pennington Avenue Bridge. And by this point, this was a very snowy afternoon, and it was snowing very, very hard as I was driving up there. And it got consistently harder as I was on the bridge. But Tom was there, a few other people were there. They had the bird in the scope, and I saw it. It was on the roof of this low-lying industrial building with a couple hundred herring gulls. And truly a remarkable sighting. And thank you to Tim Carney for finding this bird and for Tom Field and the others that located it over the coming days. And I think I mentioned this before the meeting. It's been a very elusive gull. I think I was out there 8 times overall, sometimes for all day, and I only saw the bird the once. Now since you've seen my distant snow-filled photo, this is what a good photo of a adult slaty-back gull looks like. And you can see the raspberry red legs, the head on the head contrasting with the pale eye. The mantle contrasts a little bit. It's a little bit paler than a great black-back gull, and it's a little bit paler than the black wingtips, as you can see in this photo. And then the bill is heavy, but it's parallel edged. So whereas a great black-back gull, typically the bill's swollen towards the tip, slaty-back gulls have a heavy but parallel edged bill. And slaty-back gulls are becoming more regular in parts of North America. They're annual in California now. I believe I heard that there are 2 in New York State currently. So hopefully there'll be more slaty-back gulls in Maryland in the future. Now, as time went on and I got more and more photos of gulls and more plumages, I began to dream about putting together a book. And Schiffer Publishing gave me the opportunity to pursue my dream, and I'm very grateful for that. And I'm grateful for all the people that helped me along the way. And when we were developing the books, I was thinking about things I could do that would make the book distinctive from the other books. I think one thing that's distinctive about it is it's written in non-technical language, and I tried to keep it in language that if you were with a bunch of friends looking at gulls, this is how you talk about them. It's conversational language, it's short. There's not any technical terminology or anything. And I tried to keep it accurate. I tried to keep it true to the what we know about gull identification, but I tried to keep it simple enough that people who maybe were scared off from gulls might be interested in learning more about them, and that maybe this book will be a tool to help them. So one other thing that I was thinking about this, and I think Sibley might have mentioned this when he was talking to MOS all those years ago, because initially he tried to put his book in the format of National Geographic or maybe something akin to what Peterson did. And eventually he just said, I ended up putting together the book that I would want. So I tried to do the same thing with my book. I tried to have photos of the plumages that rested in flight. And I had tried to have pictures that showed what you'd actually see out in the field. Because sometimes you see these ultra close, ultra high resolution shots that you really won't see in the field unless you have a real high powered scope or it's after the fact with high resolution photos. So I tried to focus on the field recognizable identification features of the gull. Something else I did was I have an appendix that has a summary of the gulls of Schoolhouse Pond. I have an appendix for the Ivory Gall invasion of 2009. And I tried to research and then document all the Ivory Galls of the invasion of December 2008 through early February 2009, when a lot of Ivory Galls turned up in the Northeast North America in those provinces of Canada. And it was really a remarkable event. And I tried to summarize it in the appendix. And then I also have a short appendix on the Franklin's Gull fallout of November 2015. And for those who remember back to that point, there were 20 some Franklin's Gulls at Ocean City Inlet that day. Some were in the parking lot, some were flying by. Just a really remarkable event. And I think all those things kind of show that if you just spend time in the field, you keep your eyes open, you try to learn with each day, you never know, something remarkable might happen. And I also have a working bibliography where I include all the sources that I used. And if you want more information on some of the technical research that was done or some of the other sources that I used, you'll find it there. And like I said, I wanted it to be so that it showed birds as you see them in the field. They're not just all high resolution photos, but they show gulls near, far, in groups and singly. And I guess the long and short of it is, so I tried to keep this more of an entertaining talk on the gulls of Schoolhouse Pond, the gulls of North America, a few stories mixed in. I didn't want to make it so that it was one of those book pitch talks. And I think that I'll leave it up to you whether you think it's something that's worthwhile to you. If you're a super accomplished birder that has every field mark of every North American species memorized, this might not be the book for you. But if you want to learn your gulls, if you want some interesting stories about the background about their natural history, if you have been intimidated by gulls and kind of want to get started on identifying the ones near you, then maybe it'll be useful. And you know, one thing that I liked best about the Sibley Guide and then Chandler Robbins' Golden Guide was they had these plates that showed all the similar species at a glance. And for a lot of years, I really relied on those. And I still go back to them too when I have a question about whether it's one species or the other. And that was one thing that my editor, Cheryl Weber of Schiffer, encouraged me to do, was to have some fold-out plates in the book that show a bunch of species at a glance, and you can see them, compare them, and then maybe turn to the chapter if you want to read about them a little bit more. So we have multiple fold-out composite sheets that are designed to make comparisons easy. This is the white-headed gulls, the large 4-year white-headed gulls shown, and there's also Heerman's gulls here. So this folds out from the book, and then on the opposite page, you have the accompanying 1st-year white-headed gulls and Heerman's gulls. So you see all of them at a glance, and then when you fold these sheets out from the book, you have the 1st-year gulls, and then you have the adults side by side. You can see what the beginning point and the end point of each species is, and then maybe compare similar species. We also have a plate for the hooded gulls, and of course there's a lot less of those, so we included non-breeding and breeding plumage. And with the photos, I think I took 85% of the pictures. I was blessed to have a lot of friends donate pictures: Phil Davis, Bill Hubick, Sean McCandless, among others. And then I purchased, for the gaps in my collection, I purchased as many pictures as I could afford from Vireo. And all the pictures are labeled with the location, the date, and then clear English captions depicting what you're looking at. And if you look through the pictures, you'll notice a lot of Maryland locations there: Sandy Point, Jug Bay, Conowingo Dam, Schoolhouse Pond. And this is one thing that I was most happy with. These are 2 pages that fold out. And on page 24, the left-hand side page, it's got summary tips for small gulls, medium-sized gulls, and then the large gulls, and how you age them: first year, second year, third year, and fourth year. And then the opposite page, page 25, is kind of a pictorial summary of that. So you can actually see what the gull looks like at each age, and then look over at the accompany page and see the identification shortcuts. And I think, like Rick Bloom said in his article, this is a shortcut. It'll help you identify the vast majority of gulls that you see, but sometimes you will have to go to those references and get into the technical literature for some of those real, like, hard to identify first year gulls or what have you. But hopefully what I've presented here is a good starting point for most people who maybe were like me, that were scared off by gulls or just thought they were too hard to identify. Because when you look at them, when you start studying them, they're approachable, they're where people work, live, and play. There's a lot of plumages to learn, and they're just fun to watch. And with that, so I couldn't have gotten to this point without the help of countless birders: Frank Marenghi, Bill Hubick, Sean McCandless, Jeff Cheneau, Phil Davis, and others who reviewed photos, submitted photos, looked at species accounts. I owe a special debt of gratitude for them. And but most particularly, I want to single out Gene Scarpula. He lended his expertise. He answered countless questions on my part. I would send him photos and he would help me out with the age of the identification. He reviewed all the photos. He reviewed the captions, and he shared countless gull references with me. And I am just so grateful for Gene, what he did for me, and for the others. Frank Marenghi was also a very big help. He reviewed things as well. And I owe a big debt of gratitude for these folks. I couldn't have got there without them. And hopefully the effort's been worthwhile. Now, this picture here, I got a box from Schiffer Publishing. They're based out of Lancaster, by the way. And I assumed it was just a box of books. But the first thing I pulled out of it was a bottle of wine from a local vineyard by Lancaster, and then the one advanced copy of the book. And so that was a great day. It's been a lot of years coming. I actually signed the contract for the book back in 2014, and I was actually working on photos and real rough text well before then. So thank you to all the people who helped. And I must say that, and we sort of talked about this a little bit before the meeting, the Maryland birding community is very supportive. They're very free with information. They're very willing to help people learn birds. They'll discuss field marks with you. They'll give you feedback. And there was just a lot of good camaraderie over the course of the years doing this with birders, talking about gull identifications, having a good time being with other birders. So with that, I think that concludes my presentation. You can see my email down there, glaucusgull@verizon.net. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I didn't go too long. And if Chris says it's okay, we may have a time for a few questions.
Yeah, we absolutely have time for questions. Fred, if you could stop sharing your screen,
Yeah, okay.
and then we'll get everybody visible here. But yeah, that was wonderful. I have to admit, I was online looking actually at Amazon, which shows inside the books, and your bibliography. I love this type of bibliography. It's not just the citation, but then you describe each reference that you have in just your own wording, which
That was one of the joys of it, was looking at all this stuff. And then what I tried to include in the bibliography was what I used it for or what made it special.
yeah,
And
that
so
to
those,
me, that's a very nice touch.
thank you.
And it's great that we have two of the people that were helpful in your book here with us tonight, unless a couple others joined, but Phil and Jean both on the call tonight. So yeah, this is, I'll open it up for questions. I'm sure people have questions out there. So Phil, go ahead.
Like Fred said, it took a long time. And while he was working on it, I keep seeing these ads pop up for new Gull books coming out, either from Europe or North America. And I just forward them to him and he'd never comment, but I kept getting worried that all these, about 3 of them came out, I think, during that period of time. Question, a common Gull ID challenge that we face around here on Christmas counts is overhead ring-billed herring gulls in flight. Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, yeah. So that can be difficult. And I think one thing you got to look at first is what the age of the bird is. And for first year herring gull, of course, they're the brandage plumage and they're pretty easy to figure out. Regarding the adult herring and ringbill, they can look pretty similar, but ring-billed gulls have more contrasting and more extensive black in the wingtips. And I think Sibley put it that the ring-billed gulls have black wingtips that contrast strongly with the rest of the wing. For herring gulls in adults, it's much more restricted and it tends to be more muted, and it doesn't contrast the same way ring-billed gulls do. And you can also look at the wings. Ring-billed gulls tend to be more streamlined, whereas herring gulls tend to have a fuller body and the wings tend to be wider at the base. So I look at that. But one thing that helps me typically, if you see an immature herring gull up there and you see that other gulls are of the same size, that helps simplify it a little bit. Because when Alan and Sue and I were looking at gulls the other day, we were having a lot flying over Fort Armistead, and we saw a lot of herring gulls, and a lot of times we'd see that dark brown first year bird, and then there'd be other large gulls with it. So it's like, yeah, okay, those are herring gulls as well. Oh, and one other tip, and actually I think I just heard this, and this was from somebody, I forget where Sue said, or Alan said they heard this, or somebody had mentioned it, is ring-billed gulls in flight look like their bill looks like a cigarette. Herring gulls' bills in flight look like a cigar. So yeah. I thought that was kind of interesting and amusing too. Phil, did you pick up anything? Did you have anything to add regarding that?
No, I'd always seem to have problems with it. I was looking for tips. Thank you.
Well, and the other thing regarding like lesser black-backed and great black-backed, because they can cause a lot of confusion too. But when you see them side by side in flight, great blackbacks look so much more eagle-like. They're powerful in flight. They got those wide-based wings. They've got that thick, full body. And then lesser black-backed gulls, this might be an over-exaggeration, but they always almost look more like laughing gulls to me with their structure, where the body's much more streamlined. The wings are longer relative to the body, and then the wings are narrower at the base, which all to me makes it look like much more like a streamlined laughing gull than an eagle-like great blackback. But gulls in flight are tough, and if you've got a hot spot you go to that has a lot of gulls, just spend a lot of time looking at them. And I even think I said in my bibliography that if you're looking at gulls in flight, the Sibley books is a good one to have with you because you got them all there. You can lay it out, and then when gulls fly over, you can compare them. And one other thing I'll preface my comments with is gulls are a good way to stay humble because you're always making mistakes and there's always opportunities to learn. And so I've definitely learned that lesson the hard way, and I'm still learning. I mean, every time you go out there, there's something to learn. And like this black-headed gull that's been at Ocean City Inlet or I guess it was up there for a week or two, that was a great opportunity to see that bird at close that rested in flight. And that's a first-year plumage. And for whatever reason, most of the black-headed gulls I've seen in Maryland have been adults. So it was really neat to see the first-year bird.
I still think a Mediterranean gull is going to show up here one year.
Yes, yes. I was looking at photos of Mediterranean gulls the other day, and they are very distinctive, very beautiful birds, and hopefully that's the case. That probably is a good on the short list for birds to turn up in North America at some point. I'll chase that one, by the way.
Yeah.
We can just talk. May I say?
Fred, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something, Fred. I was wondering, how will this goal book be different from all other goal books? And it really is different. Some things I like about it are when goals are compared, you have photographs of just about in the same posture, so that you're not misled by differences in lighting and posture and other things that just vary from photograph to photograph. And I like the ages presented like in a table, instead of the one page would have the different plumages, and then another page would have the different plumages. So I thought there were a lot of unique features in your book.
Well,
so that's why it is different from all other goal books.
Well, thank you for saying so. And Phil mentioned all the new goal books recently. And, you know, in 2014, I signed a contract with Schiffer for the book, but then all these goal books came out and I was kind of worried, well, gosh, is this going to put the kibosh on the whole thing? But I talked with in Schiffer, they are, were great to work with. They were very supportive. I had an editor, I had a layout person, I had marketing people, all on and on. And they were really keen to make it different than those other books. And one of the big ideas they had was those pull-out comparison sheets, which experts might turn their nose up at, but I think a lot of people who are just learning goals or maybe intermediate will find helpful. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other thing too is a lot of the goal books get real technical, detailed, literally feather by feather descriptions, and that's great. And sometimes you need that. But I tried to keep it more just focused on what you see in the field with the standard set of binoculars or a spotting scope.
Goals through binoculars.
Yeah, so I think that makes it a little bit different too. So hopefully we'll see. I will say that it was one of the most enjoyable projects that I've embarked on, and I loved every minute of it. From the traveling to different places to Seagull, with Gene and other Maryland birders, and then getting out to the West Coast and seeing some of their gulls. It was enjoyable from beginning to end. And I just hope that I did it justice. And I will say, and I think I told this to Gene, but my biggest fear was mislabeling advanced second-year gulls with retarded third-year gulls and plumages. So I put in, Gene helped me with this, and I was looking at all the different resources. But I mean, a first-year gull and an adult gull are pretty straightforward. When you get those intermediate plumages, there's a lot of variation in the rate in which they go on to the next stage. Some are behind, some are more advanced in their plumage. And so I really spent a lot of time with that, and hopefully I got it right.
So I just want to say that on Thursday, April 28th, Fred is leading a trip for our club up to Schoolhouse Pond and Schoolhouse Pond and some other ponds up in Upper Marlboro. So put that date on your calendar, Thursday, April 28th. And he's promised that next winter at this time that he will do a trip for the club, the same trip that Alan and I took with him last week, that he would do that for the club. So watch for that like next February.
And we call that the Gull Boot Camp. I do.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, and there's a lot of good gull spaces or gull watching spots in a very close proximity to Pennington Avenue, Fort Smallwood. So there's like 6 or 7 different stops we can go. They each have a different set of birds that you can sort through, and you never know. We could learn a lot. We'll have a lot of birds to look at. We might turn something rare. And I think I mentioned this at the Maryland RBA, that regardless of the slatyback gull, I'm going to go back to those spots pretty regularly, because there's just so many gulls up there that there's got to be a glaucus. The Iceland gull's probably out there somewhere. Who knows what else?
Fred,
Yes.
thank you for the great talk. While we were going through this, I just ordered the book on Amazon. Pre-order everything. From what I hear from the West Coast folks, I do some birding out there once in a while, and you didn't mention it here, is this issue of hybridization. It seems to be a kind of a big deal on the West. Maybe it's less so here, or what's the story on that?
So I actually thought about getting into that, but I kind of figured, one, that's a very thorny issue to kind of try to weed through. And the book by Howland, The Gulls of the Americas by Howland Dunn, they have kind of accounts for each of the hybrid combinations, and they cover them in pretty good detail for all ages. So I think I just referenced that in the bibliography. The only hybrid that I really got into or have pictures of was one sort of unusual bird that was seen in Eagle Harbor in Maryland. And that was a ring-billed gull, black-headed gull hybrid. And that, it just struck me as a bizarre combination, because you got a hooded gull and a medium-sized white-headed gull. And but you're absolutely right. Hybrids are a big identification issue, and I think that it is becoming more of an issue in the East too, because lesser blackback gulls and herring gulls are hybridizing pretty regularly now, and it's not too unusual to turn a potential hybrid up. And I think that they were documented breeding on Appledores Island up off New Hampshire or Maine. And so one kind of informal name for them is the Appledores gull. And you go out west and it's just a bewildering variety of hybrids. Of course, most people know the Olympic gull, Western and glaucous wing gull, but then you got the glaucous wing gull, herring gull, and then probably my favorite is the glaucous gull, glaucous wing gull, which can be very close to a glaucous gull. But it really just gets to the point where if you know what each species is supposed to look like pure, then if you see something that's intermediate, that could be a hint that it could be a hybrid. But you're absolutely right. I figured if I got into hybridism, I would probably be prone to making mistakes because I'm not an expert in that particular area. And then I think the Hal Dunn book covers it pretty good.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, and also I think that might be one of those things that could end up intimidating people from getting into gulls too. If you start talking about hybrids, people start glazing over and they might start tuning you out. So I guess I was mainly focusing on
Beginners would start seeing.
helping people identify the majority of the gulls, and the hybrids might be something out there that really takes additional study.
Well, for those of you who are thinking of going on the April trip, get your book ordered, bring it along, get it signed. And
So
we
thank you all for inviting me. This was very kind to you, and I hope it's been worthwhile.
I think this was
Fred,
a
I
great
have a
presentation.
question, Sue Riccardi.
Oh,
Um,
hi.
Hi, Fred. What's your next goal? And have you ever gone to Niagara Falls to look at the gulls there?
Oh, so I have taken 3 trips to Niagara Falls to see gulls. It's one of the most spectacular locations to see them. And actually in my bibliography, I referenced the Birdwatchers Digest article that talks about it and basically said, if you read that article, if you haven't been to Niagara Falls to watch gulls, you'll want to go there. And I guess regarding my next gulls, I guess I'd really like to see the Swallowtail Goal. And this was one that I guess it's occurred in North America 3 times, 4, but I think 2 of the sightings were actually related. I think it was seen in California, coastal California in 1985. Then there might have been another sighting around the time of 1996. And then there was another long-staying bird in 2017, and it was near Olympic, Washington. And I would really have loved to see that bird. And I didn't get the chance to get out there. That's a pretty big commitment, particularly when you're working and you got to arrange the flights and everything. Jeff Chanot did do it, but I haven't seen one of those. So I'm really hoping to see one. And incidentally, regarding that Washington state bird, that was seen in September. And then a few months later, there was a sighting somewhere in Sonoma, California. And it was a one-day wonder. I think it was identified after the fact, but it was a swallowtail gull. And so I think people suspect it was the same bird that was in Washington. Eventually it was making its way south and showed up in California. So I think that's a goal for me. And I guess I'd also like to get back up to Barrow, Alaska, just to see the Ross's gull migration. I had a great trip up there, but we spent a lot of time during the day eating and then looking at other birds. And I'd like to go up there and just look at the Ross's gulls migrating off the point for 8 hours straight. So I guess those are a couple of my bigger goals, or kind of wish list kind of things.
Can we tag along?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a great trip.
That sounds like that would be awesome.
So when I went up there, I did field guides and they ran a great trip. It was like 4 days. But I think once you've been up there once, you know the 3 or 4 streets that are there and you know where to look for the birds. So I think I'll probably end up going up by myself the next time.
Very good.
Fred,
Well, Fred, one more question?
I just wanted to comment, Fred, that your photography is just fantastic. There's beautiful shots of these gulls. I can't say enough about them. And I was really surprised with one thing in your talk that, as you know, Rick Blum was my gull mentor, who we would be looking at gulls every weekend. And I remember him saying at the time, it's easier to age gulls than it is to identify gulls, because the gulls all go through the same sequence. It's, once you know that sequence, it's easy to go first winter, second winter, third winter adult. And he said, that's the easy part. But then when you get into the identifying what gull it is, then that's another whole different ballgame. But Yeah, I was glad to see that you mentioned that in there.
Yeah, there's a whole host of identification challenges, but I think Rick probably simplified it better than anybody. And I tried to use that approach in this book. Oh, and Sue, by the way, I'm hoping at your Hawk Watch this spring to see a little gull off Fort Smallwood. So that's a short-term goal too.
Me too. I hope you're there when I'm there.
Yes.
All right, well, we are at 8:30, so I think we will wrap it up. Fred, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I think you will see a spike in sales after tonight's talk in your book. So,
Well, thank you very much. You've been very kind.
and we look forward to the April field trip and next year as well. So thanks again. Keep up the good work, and
Was that a
perhaps you'll
goal?
do another talk in a year or so after you have seen some of these new goals that you're looking for.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, and good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
See you
Thanks,
next
Fred.
time.
Good night. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thanks, Fred.
You bet. Good night.
Good night, John Boy.
Good night, Jim Bob.
Yeah.